Welcome. Another episode of Dr. James Beckett Sports Card Insights. I'm here with Rich Klein. We're going to talk about 1970 Topps baseball coming up on 30th anniversary. 40th anniversary.
Almost 50.
Whoa.
Almost 50. No, the years have flown, haven't they?
Oh my goodness. I collected those. They were my original junk wax, I think. So 50 years, and the Topps Heritage brand is evoking that. But before we get too much into that, thanks to our sponsors, Topps, Upper Deck, Panini, a couple of great auction companies, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, two great card shops, Burbank Sports Cards in Burbank, California, Mike's Stadium Sports Cards in Aurora, Colorado, and Beckett Media, which includes Beckett Grading and Beckett Authentication, and ComC out in the Seattle area. So, Rich, I bet you collected 1970
I sure
Topps.
did. It was the third year I collected.
We're old enough. We're older brother, younger brother. No, I'm not old enough to be your dad, but I'm older than you, but not way, way older. And so I collected as an adult.
I usually refer to you as Uncle Jim.
Okay, good nephew, Rich. Okay. So 70 Topps baseball.
I collected those as a kid.
Yeah.
And I never had anything past the 5th series. The 6th series and 7th series I never saw in New Jersey. I don't know why, because I saw the 69s and the 71s, but I never got past the 5th series in that year.
Ironically, I bought a large stash of 7th series, not 6, from a guy that you know in New Jersey.
I bet you his name was Tom Reed and the Reed.
Pacanella.
Oh, Pacanella. Yeah. Well, I bought a huge.
And he had a big box of high numbers, and he said, "I'm trying." It basically, maybe it was 2 boxes, but it was a wonderful buy. I thought, well, these are in nice condition. And he said, well, they've never been in a pack, but they were high numbers, and he said, I need to sell these because I'm going to buy something else and I need to raise money. And so will you give me X dollars for this? Therefore, I can go buy something else. I said, sure. So that's what we talked earlier about. It's nice to have a little bit of cash in your pocket when there's an opportunistic, just a chance to get a good deal.
Well, Pat's still dealing. He still does. My friend Gary Sipos, he sets up occasionally, if not all the time, at the Gary's Garfield Show, because on Facebook, I'm a member of the I don't know the exact term, but it's like the Garfield Show Clatch, Coffee Clatch. They go to Dunkin' Donuts before the show. They get some donuts and bagels and coffee, and they walk around the show, and then they sit and chat at the table for 2 hours on a Sunday.
This was at this either community college or small university. So you may have been at the show.
At Montclair State University.
Montclair, yeah.
The first show I ever did was springtime of 1979 at Montclair State.
We might have been there, Rich.
We probably met me 40 years ago.
I'm saying, yeah, okay.
But I like my apocryphal story better.
At any rate, so you're saying there weren't any in New Jersey, and I'm saying Pat Cannella had them all.
But then a few years later, Tom Reed, I bought a deal from Tom Reed. And other than the key players.
He may have been the original source.
He may have been, or Pat was the original source and downloaded some to Tom. Maybe. And other than the really key players, the superstars, the Nolan Ryans of the world, the Frank Robinsons, there was 10 in perfect condition, or probably 8.5s today. Yeah. But 10 really sharp of each number in the high numbers. So for a long time, I always had 70 high numbers to sell.
Where was this?
Tom got them for me.
Oh, well, I got them from the same.
We got them from the same source.
And the amazing thing is when I sent some of them in to get graded, I thought, well, surely these are 10s. And they were 8.5s, right? And which is still a great grade for a card that's almost 50 years old, but still it wasn't a 10. I thought, these I don't think they'd ever been in a pack.
No, they
were essentially, they were very well centered. They weren't badly centered, but 8.5.
But what's interesting with 70, one of the other interesting aspects is how few stars and superstars there are in the lower series compared to the high series.
Because usually Topps front loaded,
right,
to try to get get a good start on the year.
But that year was severely backloaded. Yeah. Hank Aaron's number 500, Willie Mays is 600, Frank Robinson 700, Al Kaline, Ernie Banks are all in the high number series. A lot of the old established vets that you would expect to see in the early series are all in the higher series, and they did a lot of that again in 71. I think Seaver's number 300, Roberto Clemente I think is 350.
350, yeah.
Denny McLean, who I can understand why they did that, is 400. Reggie Jackson's 140, I think. Yeah. But there's not a ton of the really big names early that you expected to be big names early that year.
Well, I remember in the early 70s having some 70 Topps, mainly first and second series, and they were maybe commons and semi-stars, and I bricked them up to sell them at shows, 100 for $1, and I lugged them around.
Those cards, the first 2 series in 1970 are easy. And when I say they're easy, they may be the easiest cards until 74 and the set where they're all done at the same time. I mean, for whatever reason, 70, the first 2 series are just, I don't want to say overprinted.
Well, comparatively for the rest of the set.
But comparatively to the rest of the set, they're overprinted.
Well, it actually is worse than that. As I'm trying to tell some stories on myself, is that basically the mistake I made, of course, I don't remember there being the little plastic cases that would hold 100 cards. So what in that? And I don't remember wrapping them up in saran wrap or anything like that. I think I had them rubber banded, which is doubly bad. Number one, it's bad because it messes up, it crimps, the first and last card.
Yeah.
But again, they were a penny apiece. But it also made it possible that someone could take off the rubber band and leaf through the cards and say, no, I don't want these, because they could say they were all in the below 264 or whatever the magic number was there, like you said, or at least in the, at most into the third series.
Right.
And then people just didn't need them.
And then the third, fourth, fifth series, which I also collected, are a little bit more difficult. At least, they're not. They're not.
I draw the line between 3 and 4, but maybe.
But I think 3 is reasonably slightly as well. And there's no real variations. There's some checklist variations. I mean, there's a couple sad things. Really, your key card in the set is Thurman Munson, card 189. 189, yeah. And he passed away too young.
Right.
And then there were some other people. Paul Edmondson, who dies in a car crash coming back from basic training or some sort of military service. Herman Hill has a rookie card, and he drowns while swimming, and the rumor was that I swore I read somewhere he was eaten by sharks. If so, he's the only baseball player ever to have that. Miguel Fuentes, card 88, on a pilot's rookie, gets killed in a bar fight at like the age of 22. There are just some cards that you're not going to find autographed.
So the moral of the story is don't be in the 70 tops.
There were a lot of really sad stories in 70 tops. For whatever reason, 70 tops had a lot of guys.
Well, was it the biggest set up to its time?
It was by far the biggest set. It was 720 cards in the year before.
664?
69 was 664. Yeah. And then the next 2 years tops would continue.
Go up a little more, yeah.
Until then they had the 660 and 726 and 792 things. Right. So eventually I think that's the stops, that begins the last rush of expanding the set each year. And they still miss Jim Bounton. Jim Bounton had pitched, and this is before Ball 4 comes out, and he had pitched 73 games the year before. You have 720 cards and you still miss Jim Bounton.
Yeah, well, that was payback, I think.
It probably was.
What about, do you think the next last series is a little bit underrated?
I think it's very underrated. They're almost as tough, if not as tough as the high numbers. And as we discussed, there's a lot.
Well, that's our experience, because we found a source for some high numbers. I've never seen the equivalent for the next last series.
Neither have I. And there's so many stars and Hall of Famers and minor stars. I'm just from the top of my head. Catfish Hunter, Gaylord Perry, Ernie.
And those are tougher.
Yeah. Even minor stars like Tommy Davis is in there, Norm Cash. There's a lot of good cards in those series. As I said, they almost backloaded the set.
Right, which doesn't make sense to me, but I don't know. I mean, Topps was the only game around.
They sure were.
Now, on the other hand, my sense is the earlier series were primarily the ones that had the inserts.
Correct. There are no inserts that I remember in the last 2 series.
The booklets, the posters, the scratch-offs, those were... not necessarily series 1, 2, 3, but it seems
think they're 3, 4, 5, or 2, 3, 4.
Right in there where they're getting going. And by the series 6 and 7, there's a lot of, like you say, a lot of stars in there.
So maybe that's what they were trying to do. When
that's your incentive to buy.
Right.
But
maybe when
looking back, those particular inserts are not that strong.
And maybe when you're the only game in town and you are still competing with yourself, you're thinking, how can we improve sales? So let's try this tack this year. We don't have the records, so we're not.
But even then, it's an exact science. I mean, the booklets were an attempt to narrate and personalize those 24 guys or whatever there were. The posters were, again, history's not been kind to most of these poster inserts, and the scratch-offs. In the age of grading, that's a giant no-no. But I don't see that many that were scratched off.
No. I played 1 game. I've done 2 games. But what I think is interesting is today, Topps logo is we bring you closer to the game. I think at least for
those were attempts.
And those were attempts even 50 years ago to bring you closer to the game.
Right.
And and we've mentioned heritage. And if you really study every heritage set, there's always a lot of nods to the previous set. Like this year,
Topps Heritage has been a fabulous initiative.
And the best known example, because he's so good about signing cards you sent to him, is Pat Neshek.
Yeah.
They put Pat Neshek.
He's a collector.
They put Pat Neshek in the Lowell Palmer pose on number 254 with the sunglasses. Lowell Palmer always had sunglasses on his cards. Well, Pat Neshek became Lowell Powell this year, Lowell Palmer, and has the sunglasses on his cards. And it's really cool that they worked that out with him to put the sunglasses on.
There are other, when we say 1970 Topps baseball, we're essentially referring to the product that had the regular cards with the inserts. But there were other 1970 Topps issues.
There's the Giants,
the Supers, Giant Supers, whatever. And they were in their own packs, so they weren't in the packs with the cards.
And I collected
some
of
they're
those.
Collectible. I remember having those back in the day. But again, they were not very saleable. There's also cloth stickers.
Those are
which are super
really tough.
And I
think you've got a type or 2 of those.
I might, but I just don't even remember. There's very little is known about that. And you and I have been trying to find not just the cards, but information about the cards. I've never had a satisfactory answer about that. If it's a test, it was extremely limited. And then the candy lids are the other ones, which there are some easier candy lids in 73. But these candy lids, again, you say there was a test issue. It was so successful, they waited 3 years to do another. And it wasn't overproduced, but you can find those. the 70 candy lids
You can't
are
find.
very, very tough.
What's interesting is you can find, like, for example, the next year, 71 Greatest Moments. You can find those cards, but I don't think anybody's ever seen a wrapper of 71 Greatest Moments. So again, that was probably either a super.
I was around I was around shortly after that. I wasn't really.
Have you ever seen a wrapper of 71?
No, but I know some guys that said, how many sets do you want? Back in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
So they were, and it was, I'm not thinking statute of limitations. There were,
I think at
it
this
was
point, that's
6
over.
degrees of separation for tops.
Yeah, in other words,
just
card
put it
collect.
that-
We'll say card collectors.
No, I'm not going to say anything, Rich.
Okay.
I'm just saying that there would be some quantity of them, and they were in nice shape. And the person I know said, do you want some sets of those? And would you like to trade them for other stuff? And foolishly, I didn't, because they're still tough. Other than that original find or hoard, whatever it was, once those got dissipated, they're tough.
Yeah, that happens.
And they've got a Munson in there, right?
They have a Munson there. As a matter of fact, Munson and Grody, I think, are the only two people, because they're catchers and they're all shot in New York.
Yeah.
Jerry Grody and maybe Munson, I believe, they're the only two people that actually appear on more than one Greatest Moment cards. They're the catchers in there. And, and those are black borders. That's at least those cards.
And they're, again, but the ones I was offered had never seen the inside of a pack. They were like a cut card. And they're collated. How many sets do you want? That's
and they're
scary.
like what we're talking about with the candy lids and the claw stickers, except those have never shown up.
Those have never shown up in any kind of quantity. So, at any rate, it was a great year. I stand corrected. 50 years ago, that's really scary. So I said I was an adult collector. I was a very young adult collector at that time, and you were probably in your
I was a kid collector.
boyhood prime.
Yep.
So again, thanks, Rich, for
Jim.
looking at this together. A lot of fun. We'll do it again tomorrow or the next day. And we thank you, listeners, for your attention. Tell your friends. Again, we're doing different episodes. Each day we'll take a different topic. We don't just only do card sets or certain players, but we've got a lot of different themes as we get started here to see what people like the best. So again, thanks for your attention. Talk to you soon. Bye.